Of two daughters, I am the oldest and go by Barbara. I've always been the serious one, the independent one, from as long back as I can remember. Michelle, my sister, was precisely the reverse. Our house was always noisy growing up. Michelle's laughter, Mom and Dad's loving attention on her, and the continual buzz of pop tunes running in the background. Me, I liked peaceful areas, my nose buried in a book or focusing on homework. Birthdays and holidays always made it very evident how different Michelle and I were. She would tear through her presents, squealing with delight over the newest devices or fashion-forward clothing. I, on the other hand, meticulously saved any money I got. "What are you saving for Ratch this time?" Dad would inquire, a trace of pride in his voice, but his eyes revealed he lacked total understanding. "A laptop for learning," I said. "The library computers are often crowded." He nodded, but I could see they didn't understand why I didn't desire what other girls my age did. Michelle was a swirl of fresh ideas and constant pressure. "Mom, did you check out the latest iPhone? Every student at the institution carries it. I need it," she would say. She would also receive it. No questions, no saving. I recall the day I at last paid for my laptop. Months of savings had gone on investigating the ideal model. I felt quite proud when I got it home. "Look, at last I understand," I declared at dinner. Mom turned her head from her dish. "That's great, sweetheart. Oh, Michelle, tell us about your mall day." And the topic changed exactly like that. Michelle descended into a protracted narrative about her shopping trip, and my success vanished from view. It was not that they did not love me. I knew they did in their own unique manner. But Michelle was the sun in our family's solar system, and I was a far-off planet gently revolving on my own path. The variations between us just grew as we grew older. Michelle followed the most current fashion trends and experimented with wild hair. I stayed with my comfy trousers and sensible ponytail. The library became my quiet haven where I could concentrate on my objectives, free from any interruptions. When it came time for college, I gave all I had on applications. I stayed late many nights honing essays, investigating scholarships, and preparing for admission tests. One of the finest times of my life came when I received my acceptance letter bearing a full scholarship. Running into the kitchen, I waved the letter. "Dad, Mom, I entered under a full scholarship." Mom turned to help Michelle with her makeup. "That's lovely, sweetheart. Hold steady, Michelle. I'm trying to get your eyeliner exactly correct." Dad turned to check his newspaper. "Good work, Barbara." Nothing less was what we expected. Their lack of enthusiasm wounded, but I was used to it. I returned to my room clutching the letter. This was my opportunity to at last escape, to prove myself. Michelle hardly made it through high school in meantime. The day Sarah handed her failing report card, I considered our parents might at last be let down. Rather, though, they encircled her with encouragement. Mom, patting her hair, whispered, "Oh, sweetie, don't worry. Everyone does not find college to be ideal. You are quite gifted in many other areas." Dad nodded. "That's right, princess. You will figure out your road." It still astounds me. "Are you sincere?" She almost made it. I blurted forward. Mom fixed me a stern glance. "Barbara, try not to be nasty. Your sister is endowed with various gifts." I bit my tongue, then turned to go. Michelle would always be their favorite, no matter what I accomplished. Attaching college was a fresh beginning. I was surrounded for the first time by people that valued diligence and drive. Resolved to maximize this opportunity, I immersed myself into my studies. In my second year, one day I got a call from home. It was Michelle, her voice as usual lively. "Ratch, guess what? I consider enrolling in some classes on beauty. Mom and Dad find that to be a fantastic idea." Though I knew she wouldn't care, I wanted to tell her about the research project I was working on or the summer internship I had landed. After hanging up, I felt both frustrated and motivated. I was on my own path, and I was going to make it count. Years passed quickly. While Michelle jumped from one beauty course to the next without finishing anything, I graduated with honors. I got a job at a top company even before my diploma was dry. Moving into my own apartment was a bittersweet moment. As I unpacked my few belongings, I thought about how different my life was from Michelle's. She was still at home, pampered by our parents, while I was standing on my own, ready to take on the world. The first few months at my job were a blur. I worked longer hours than anyone else, determined to prove myself. Within a year of hard work, I was promoted to team leader. Excited, I called home to share the news. Mom picked up the phone. "Oh, Barbara, that's nice, but guess what? Michelle met the most wonderful boy. He comes from such a good family. We're all so thrilled." As she went on about Michelle's new boyfriend, my promotion seemed to disappear into the background. I hung up, feeling deflated, but it only made me more determined. If my family couldn't value my achievements, I'd just have to achieve even more. I threw myself into my work with everything I had. Days turned into nights and weekends became extra opportunities to get ahead. My hard work paid off. One promotion led to another, and before long, I became the youngest department head in the company's history. One day, Mr. Paul, the company owner, called me into his office. "Barbara, your work has been outstanding. We've never had someone rise through the ranks so quickly," he said with a smile. "Thank you, sir. I love what I do," I replied, beaming with pride. "And it shows," he said. "That's why I want to offer you something special. We have a program for top employees, a chance to buy an apartment at a significant discount. You've earned it." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and planning. When I finally got the keys to my new apartment, I felt like I was floating. I decided to host a housewarming party to celebrate with the people who mattered most. Since I didn't have much furniture yet, I bought some inexpensive plastic tables and chairs and set everything up with care. Even the disposable tableware matched the decor. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. On the day of the party, my colleagues arrived first, bringing thoughtful gifts and warm congratulations. Then my family showed up. Mom, Dad, and Michelle came in like a whirlwind. Michelle's eyes darted around the room, taking in the modest furnishings. I caught the smirk she tried to hide. As the evening went on, I noticed a pattern. Every time one of my colleagues congratulated me or brought up my accomplishments, my parents would quickly change the subject to Michelle. "Oh, that reminds me," Mom said, cutting off one of my coworkers mid-sentence. "Did Barbara tell you about Michelle's latest modeling gig? She's just so photogenic." Dad chimed in. "Yes, our Mel was born for the spotlight. Such natural talent." I saw the confused and slightly uncomfortable looks on my colleagues' faces as the focus shifted from my achievements to Michelle once again. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Michelle, on the other hand, soaked up the attention. "Oh, Mom, stop it," she'd say with a giggle, clearly enjoying every second. Finally, thankfully, my family left. The moment the door closed, my coworker Laura turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Barbara, what the hell was that?" she asked, her voice low and concerned. I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "Oh, that's just how they are." Another colleague, David, shook his head. "No, Barbara, that's not normal. Are you okay? Do you need help?" A lump formed in my throat. Their concern was touching, but also embarrassing. "Guys, really, it's fine. I'm used to it," I said, forcing a smile. "Who wants another drink?" As I busied myself in the kitchen, I could hear them whispering, their worry obvious. I blinked back tears, refusing to let them see how much my family's behavior had hurt me. After that disastrous housewarming, I buried myself in work again, determined to move forward. The months flew by, and slowly I turned my apartment into a home I could truly be proud of. Every piece of furniture, every splash of color on the walls was a reminder of my hard work and independence. One sunny Monday, I decided to treat myself to something I'd been saving for, a car. It wasn't flashy, just a reliable setting to get me where I needed to go. As I drove it home, a wave of pride washed over me. This car was mine, bought with my own money, a symbol of everything I had accomplished. I hadn't planned to tell my family, but news spread fast. That evening, my phone rang, and Michelle's cheerful voice came through the speaker. "Ratch, I heard you bought a car. That's nice," she said, though her tone made it clear she didn't mean it. "You know, you're really doing things the hard way. All this working and saving. It's so unnecessary." Her words made my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," she said, as if explaining something obvious, "the main job of a woman is to marry properly. Find a man who will take care of you and give you everything you need. Why work yourself to death when you could have it all handed to you?" I was speechless for a moment. "Michelle, that's not how I see things. I want to earn what I have. I'm proud of what I've accomplished." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Ratch, always the difficult one. Well, you'll see. I'll show you how it's done." Before I could respond, Michelle had hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. How could we see life so differently? A few months later, I got my answer. Michelle called, her voice full of excitement. "Barbara, you'll never guess. I'm getting married. His name is Nicholas, and he's absolutely loaded. His parents are paying for everything. The wedding's going to be stunning." As she went on about the dresses, flowers, and guest list, I felt an emptiness inside me. This was what she had been working toward, her idea of success. The wedding day came faster than I expected. I stood in a grand hall, surrounded by glittering guests, feeling out of place. Michelle looked radiant in her designer gown, and our parents couldn't stop beaming with pride. I sipped champagne, trying to swallow the bitterness building inside me. Had my parents ever looked at me with such pride? Had they ever been this happy about anything I'd achieved? As the night went on, I felt more and more like a stranger. Michelle thrived in the spotlight, charming the guests and soaking up the attention. Our parents introduced themselves to everyone, proudly announcing, "We're the parents of the bride." On my way home, driving my modest car back to my modest apartment, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the wrong choices. Was Michelle right? Had I chosen the harder path for nothing? But then I thought about my job, my achievements, and the pride I felt knowing I had earned everything on my own. No, I decided. My path might be harder, but it was mine. That made all the difference. After Michelle's wedding, life settled into a routine. Work kept me busy, but my mother's calls became irregular and unwelcome, interruption. Every conversation followed the same pattern. "Barbara, darling," Mom would start, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You won't believe what Michelle's been up to." I'd brace myself as she launched into another story about Michelle's fabulous life. She's been invited to the most exclusive events. Can you believe it? Our Michelle rubbing elbows with high society. One day, after an especially exhausting call, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Mom, that's great for Michelle," I said, frustration leaking into my voice. "But don't you want to know what's going on in my life?" There was a pause. Then Mom said in a patronizing tone, "Oh, honey, of course we care, but you really should learn from your sister. Be more glamorous. Why work so hard for so little when you could have it all?" A few weeks later, I received an invitation. Michelle and Nicholas were throwing a housewarming party for their new luxury apartment, a gift from his parents, naturally. The night of the party, I stood outside Michelle and Nicholas's building, feeling small. I smoothed down my simple dress, took a deep breath, and walked in. The apartment was breathtaking. Every surface sparkled, and every piece of furniture looked like it cost more than I made in a year. My parents were already there, marveling at every detail. Tried to stay in the background, but Michelle spotted me almost immediately. She walked over, holding a champagne flute, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Barbara, so glad you could make it," she said, her tone sweet but her gaze critical. "I hope you're taking notes. This is how a housewarming should be done. None of that plastic furniture and disposable dishes nonsense like at your place." My cheeks burned. "Michelle, that's—" But she didn't wait to hear the rest, already flitting off to dazzle other guests, leaving me standing there with the sting of her words. In the weeks that followed, Michelle seemed determined to flaunt her lifestyle at every turn. She bought the most expensive things, clothes, jewelry, you name it. Then came the car. One evening after work, a sleek sports car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and there was Michelle, her face smug. "Like it," she purred. "Just a little gift from Nicholas. Thought I'd take it for a spin." I glanced at my plain but dependable sedan. "It's very nice, Michelle." She followed my gaze and laughed. "Oh, Barbara, always settling for less. You'll always be working for others while I live the good life." Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. 3 years passed in a blur of spreadsheets, meetings, and promotions as I climbed the corporate ladder. Meanwhile, Michelle seemed happy-hopping from one shopping spree to another. Our lives couldn't have been more different, but I'd learned to accept it, or so I thought. Then, on an ordinary Saturday, everything changed. Mom called, her voice shaky. "Barbara, it's Michelle. She's back home. Nicholas left her. He said she's too shallow, too focused on spending his money. He called her stupid. Can you believe it? And she signed a prenup. She has nothing." A wave of emotions hit me. Shock, concern, and if I was honest, a tiny flicker of vindication. I quickly pushed that feeling aside, ashamed of myself. "I'm coming over," I said, already grabbing my keys. When I arrived at my parents' house, it felt like stepping into a war zone. I could hear Michelle screaming from the driveway. Inside, it was chaos. Michelle was in the living room, mascara streaked down her face, her designer clothes disheveled. She was throwing anything within reach, vases, picture frames, cushions. "He can't do this to me," she shrieked, her voice raw with anger and despair. "I'm Michelle. I'm beautiful. I'm perfect," she cried, her voice filled with rage and tears. Mom and Dad hovered around her, trying desperately to calm her down. "Sweetie, please," Mom pleaded. "We'll figure this out. Dad will buy you a new dress, won't you, dear?" Dad nodded quickly. "Of course, princess. Anything you want." I stood there, watching this strange scene unfold, feeling like I had stepped into an alternate reality. This couldn't be how life was supposed to work, could it? As the days passed, Michelle's tantrums didn't stop. She'd cry for hours, then scream, then demand expensive gifts to make herself feel better. And our parents, eager to keep her happy, gave her everything she asked for. One evening, after another meltdown, I couldn't hold back any more. "Maybe," I said carefully, "Michelle should consider getting a job. It might help her appreciate the value of money and give her something to focus on." The room fell silent. Then, all at once, chaos erupted. Michelle's face twisted in anger. "A job? Like you, slaving away every day like some peasant." She spat. Bursting into tears, she ran upstairs, slamming her door so hard the whole house shook. Before I could even process what had happened, Mom and Dad turned on me. "How dare you?" Mom hissed. "Your sister is going through a terrible time, and you suggest she lower herself to your levels." I didn't mean it like that. I tried to explain, but they weren't listening. "Get out," Dad said, his voice cold. "Get out of this house right now," Mom added, pointing at the door. "And don't come back until you can be supportive of your sister." In a daze, I grabbed my purse and left. When I walked into my apartment, my sanctuary, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness at being rejected by my family, anger at their blindness to Michelle's faults, and oddly, a sense of relief. For the first time, I saw how toxic my family had been all these years. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Just days after the blow-up with my family, I got news that left me stunned. I had won a company contest. The prize, a 5-month, all-expenses-paid cruise around the world. In a moment of weakness, or maybe hope, I decided to call my parents. Maybe this good news could heal the rift between us. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe it. I won a cruise around the world." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then my mother's cold voice broke through. "Barbara, how can you be so selfish? Your sister is going through a terrible time, and you're bragging about vacations?" As though I had been slapped. I said softly, not flaunting anything. "I simply considered." Mom interrupted me, though. "If you had any decency, you would assign that ticket to Michelle," she remarked harshly. "She requires a change of environment. As usual, you can stay home and work." Something inside of me caught fire. Years of irritation burst all at once. "No," I responded with great force. "I was going on this trip. I obtained it. Michelle made poor decisions, so I am not giving it up. I'm traveling." The next several weeks passed in a haze as I prepared. I arranged everything at work, packed my luggage, and on the day of departure, I did something I had never done before. I turned off my cell phone. I felt free for the first time in many years. The cruise fulfilled all I had imagined. In Malta, I saw breathtaking sunsets. In Romania, I saw old ruins, and I strolled through Singapore's crowded streets. I was just Barbara for 4 amazing months, not the family failure or the responsible older sister. All good things, nevertheless, have to fade. Reality struck when the ship grounded back home. Turning on my phone, I expected a deluge of messages, but only a handful of my parents' missed calls. I headed home feeling lighter than I had in years. Heard sounds inside my apartment as I got closer. My pulse thumped. Had somebody broken in? With caution opening the door, she was there. Michelle. She was stretched on my couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers and shopping bags. "Michelle," said. I started to gasp. "What are you doing here?" She looked up, barely reacting to my sudden arrival. "Oh, you're back, finally." I stood frozen, my keys still in my hand. "How did you get in here?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Barbara. I used the spare keys you left with Mom and Dad. I needed a change of scenery. Everything at home reminded me of, you know." I stared at her, speechless. This was too much. "I need air," I muttered, grabbing my car keys and heading outside. But when I got to the parking lot, my car was gone. Panic set in as I called my parents. Mom picked up, her voice overly cheerful. "Barbara, dear, how was your trip?" "Where's my car?" I cut straight to the point. There was a pause, and then Dad came on the line. "We sold it." The world seemed to spin. "You what?" Michelle needed cheering up. Mom said casually, as if it were no big deal. "We used the money to take her shopping and to the spa." What I was hearing defied belief. "That was my car. You had nowhere right," I yelled. Dad's voice then cut in, sharp and contemptuous. "Now, Barbara, we are a family. That is yours. Ours is what is. Do not act selfishly." I snapped something inside of me. Years of frustration, bitterness, and wrath spilled all at once. Selfish. You raided my house, stole my automobile, and I am selfish. I want my money taken back. Now, Their response was sharp and instantaneous. They branded me a letdown, unappreciative, heartless. Stung, but for the first time they did not break me. Completely blind to the tempest within me, I hung up the phone, marched back into my flat, and found Michelle still asleep on my couch. "Get out," I said softly but forcefully. Startled, Michelle turned to gaze up. "Wonderful. Exit, currently." She tried to argue, to dominate me as usual, but this time I moved nothing. For the first time, I started first. The next day, I sued my parents for the worth of my car and paid a lawyer. Furious, they swore to disavow me and cut me from their will. I did not, nonetheless, back off. That matter came before the court. Laying years of financial abuse and emotional manipulation for strangers to hear was exhausting. Still, at least justice was done. My parents had to sell their house to pay for back-off since the judge determined in my favor, declaring to everyone who would listen that I was the villain who had destroyed their life. They moved into a modest apartment. Once more, though, their words did not reach me. New from the showroom, my new car made me lighter on the road. First in my life, I felt quite free, released from their expectations, under control and under manipulation. Chose grudgingly to cut off all contact with my family. The first few months were hard. One could sometimes be doubtful and lonely, but I began to live on my own terms gradually. At work, I gave it everything and moved quickly up the ladder. New individuals I encountered valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I moved, developed new interests, and discovered enjoyment in everyday objects. Mostly, I came to enjoy me, to esteem my strength, will, and worth. I smile now as I sit in my office peering out over the city skyline. Though not easy, it was mine. I made this life step by step, decision after decision. I would not change anything.